All right, it looks like we've got a good number of folks joining. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining me for today's webinar. My name is Andrea DeWees, and I'm the Associate Director of Product Innovation Utility Partnerships here at 3 Degrees. And I'm grateful for the opportunity today to talk about best practices for a successful voluntary program and how those best practices can be applied to gas utilities looking to design, launch, and implement a new voluntary program. All attendees will be in listen-only mode today, which means that everyone will remain muted for the entirety of the webinar. We've reserved time at the end, though, for question and answer. So feel free to put your questions in the Zoom Q&A section rather than the chat so that we can keep track of questions throughout the presentation. So I'll get started here. For today's webinar, I'll share first a little bit about 3 Degrees before digging into the problem we're seeing gas utilities face in the market today. Then I'll talk about how voluntary programs can be a great near-term win-win solution for gas utilities as they're getting started on their decarbonization journey. Finally, I'll walk through a series of best practices gas utilities can take to ensure that they are designing, launching, and managing a successful voluntary program. And after that, we'll transition to question and answer. Let's get started. For those of you not familiar with 3 Degrees, allow me to share a little bit about us. We are a leading global climate solutions provider that helps organizations achieve renewable energy and decarbonization goals. One of our areas of expertise is helping gas and electric utilities design, build, and grow successful voluntary renewable energy and carbon credit programs. We're also a proud certified B Corporation or benefit corporation and have been so for 10 years. As a certified B Corp, we work toward the vision of using business as a force for good by uncovering opportunities that optimize the triple bottom line for our clients. We offer a full suite of decarbonization solutions across all emission scopes, including carbon credit and RNG certificate supply and services for both corporate and utility clients. Our utility partnerships team, of which I'm a part, has supported successful voluntary programs for electric and gas utilities nationwide for 2 decades now. We are skilled in building awareness for and growing participation in voluntary utility programs. We also offer full service supply for those programs, whether that be RECs, carbon credits, or RNG certificates. We know the market for these products, we know regulated utilities, and we know the end customer, both residential and commercial. We're also a proud partner to 6 of the top 10 NREL utility green power programs and the nation's best-selling utility carbon credit program. I'm really, really proud of that. All right, now that we've had a chance to get acquainted, let's take a look at the problem we're seeing in the market today. In talking with gas utilities nationwide over the past few years, we've learned about the challenges they're facing responding to pressure to demonstrate action on climate change from customers, investors, legislators, and other stakeholders. Given the broad range of options that gas utilities can consider when setting their decarbonization strategy, one of the main questions that we're hearing from gas utilities is, what is the right set of solutions to demonstrate appropriate, prudent action? Well, the answer to this question is becoming more urgent for gas utilities to answer as the climate crisis intensifies and as the impacts of inaction can show up for gas utilities in multiple forms. First, there's regulatory risk that can show up as state-level mandates for gas utilities to offer renewable or low-carbon fuel programs to their customers. An example of this is in Washington State, where I'm located, under House Bill 1257, which requires gas utilities to offer by tariff an RNG service for its customers. This requirement set a deadline and specific requirements for the program, which arguably resulted in less flexibility for gas utilities in the state. There's also the risk of electrification to the gas utility business model through state and local building electrification codes or legislation for all-out gas bans. According to the S&P Global Market Intelligence Monitor, our gas ban monitor, as of April 2022, there were 50 towns or cities, plus 4 counties in California in particular, where a local gas ban and/or an electrification code had been adopted. And finally, there's also the ongoing possibility of customer defection, where a gas utility's largest commercial customers could decide to fully electrify or source their own renewable natural gas in order to meet their increasingly aggressive climate and net zero goals. This has the potential to result in lost revenues for the gas utility and increasing rate pressure on the rest of the customer base. Gas utilities are still relatively early in their journeys, and the pressure to do something now to address these impacts is adding to the urgency for gas utilities to take action as soon as possible. Adding to this pressure is the need for gas utilities to weigh a number of options when determining their multi-pronged decarbonization strategy that should be made up of these right set of appropriate and prudent solutions. Gas utilities will need to balance taking urgent, shorter-term action in addition to investing in increasingly impactful, longer-term strategies. Among the options we've heard that gas utilities are weighing include a focus on differentiated gas, such as certified natural gas or RNG, renewable natural gas, infrastructure investments, such as pipeline leakage repairs or future hydrogen infrastructure build-out, and technology innovations in the future that could support things like non-pipeline alternatives or carbon capture and sequestration projects. The challenge with many of these solutions that you see in this table is that they're still currently cost prohibitive and or can be fairly time consuming to implement, which can push their feasibility out into the medium or the longer term. Meanwhile, customer programs, and in particular, voluntary programs, can offer a shorter term, effective way for the gas utility to demonstrate that they're taking action today by offering their customers choice in addressing their carbon emissions. Voluntary programs are also an applicable and appropriate solution over the long term, so they can fit short, medium, and long term here, allowing for a consistent mechanism for customer engagement and a solution that can adapt with and complement the gas utility's other decarbonization strategies over time. So coming back to this question of how can gas utilities take action today? Well, from our experience, we know that a voluntary program can provide customers with an actionable way to address their emissions today without distracting the utility from its other decarbonization efforts. A voluntary program can help a gas utility respond to that pressure that they're getting from their customers and stakeholders by demonstrating immediate action. They provide a path for the gas utility to offer their customers choice to address their emissions from natural gas use. They can be complementary to the utility's other decarbonization efforts. And perhaps most importantly, they offer the gas utility an opportunity to increase engagement with their customer base. We think that voluntary programs can be one solution that's part of a gas utility's larger strategy and something that can be implemented in the short term. However, gas utilities have been slow to adopt voluntary programs and often don't know how to make the business case for them. This is likely due to the fact that voluntary programs are still a new concept to gas utilities, especially to those that are fairly early in their decarbonization journey. If voluntary programs are new to you, you might be wondering, well, what exactly is a voluntary program? You've said that word 100 times. What exactly does it entail? Well, typically, a utility voluntary program is defined as an opt-in program offered by the utility to its residential and commercial customers, where the customer agrees to pay a premium on their utility bill to cover the incremental cost of a value-add product, such as renewable energy and or carbon credits. These types of programs originated in the electric utility industry and are referred to as utility green power or green pricing programs. And hopefully some of you are also subscribers or participants of voluntary programs. The program design must balance type, location, and price of the program's renewable energy and or carbon credit supply such that there's sufficient customer interest in the product and that the product is priced within an acceptable range of that customer's willingness to pay. Voluntary programs are largely designed to not impact the rate base, meaning that only the participants of the program are the ones covering the cost of the program. And they do require a certain amount of marketing support in order to meet the participation goals necessary for strong economic performance of the program, So in other words, in order to meet payback goals the utility may have for the program, it requires a certain amount of consistent enrollments over time. The program should also meet industry disclosure and Federal Trade Commission green marketing guidelines to ensure transparency and consumer advocacy as that program is delivered to customers. We also think that voluntary programs are a near-term win-win solution that help to solve both the utilities and the customers' challenges. We know that gas utilities are facing mounting pressure from customers, investors, and other stakeholders. A voluntary program can provide the utility with an opportunity to demonstrate immediate action in response to that pressure. Gas utilities customers, especially their largest customers, want options to address their emissions from natural gas use. A voluntary program provides the utility with a compelling offer to customers who want a solution that is cost-effective. There are many strategies that a gas utility can and should take to respond to decarbonize. It can be difficult to understand where to start. A voluntary program is a short-term strategy that can be implemented relatively quickly that will be complementary to those other decarbonization efforts. And the nature of utilities, as many of us know, is that customers are not terribly engaged with their utility companies. Over and over, we've seen voluntary program participation result in an increase in engagement with the customer base. Customers who participate in their utility's voluntary program are more engaged and more likely to participate in other programs the utility has to offer than non-participating customers. I will take a moment here to say that developing and launching a voluntary program is not without its own set of risks and considerations. To ensure a successful voluntary program that can deliver on being a win-win solution, it's important that gas utilities keep in mind a few key considerations as they look to get started. These types of considerations can include regulatory hurdles, uncertainty about supply, and changing customer interest, as well as a need for sufficient amount of expertise on the fundamentals of standing up a voluntary program, including program design, marketing, communications, and overall program management. While voluntary gas programs are relatively new to gas utilities, these programs have many similarities to the voluntary green power programs that have been offered by electric utilities for decades. And as such, we believe there's much that gas utilities can learn in terms of applying best practices to mitigate the risks and challenges of these types of program considerations as they look to design and launch successful voluntary programs. We at 3 Degrees have partnered with electric and gas utilities to design, build, and grow voluntary programs for the better part of 2 decades. Based on our experience, we've uncovered a number of foundational best practices that apply to all utilities, electric or gas, that will help ensure a voluntary program. All of the best practices you see here apply regardless of where a utility is in their journey. And we would certainly encourage every gas utility to follow each of these best practices throughout the process. However, some of these best practices are especially important for gas utilities to consider depending on where they are in their journey, especially when they're getting started to develop and implement these voluntary programs. So I know there's a lot of boxes on this slide. I will walk through each of these stages based on the development journey. So we'll start on the left and work our way to the right. On the left-hand side here for gas utilities that are early in their journey or just getting started developing a program, they will benefit most from these 3 things: understanding their customers, working with stakeholders, and gaining internal alignment as the voluntary program is designed. We know that successful utilities have been the ones to take the time up front to understand their customer segments, including conducting market research to both validate demand and understand how different customers make price and different value decisions. These utilities are also more likely to have different types of programs for residential and commercial customers. We've seen them work with, and we encourage them to work with, environmental and ratepayer advocates who can either be staunch supporters or opponents early in the program design process to understand what they value and help them understand the trade-offs as you're designing the program. Lastly, gaining internal alignment so that the teams are working toward the same end rather than what can feel like undermining efforts to design and launch a voluntary program. There are many impacted departments within a utility when a new program is designed. This can include customer service, billing, rates, regulatory affairs, program managers, communications, and finance. It's important to identify which internal stakeholders you will need to align with early on in the process. For gas utilities that are developing, implementing, and diversifying their programs, they will benefit most from these four things: creating value with their programs, including budget for startup costs, knowing their billing system, and going local or being flexible with supply if possible. We know that successful utilities have been the ones to create value with their programs by increasing customer satisfaction. We've seen that voluntary program participants have higher customer satisfaction and brand loyalty to their utility than non-participant utility customers. This often is a result of the choice being offered to these customers within the context of a regulated monopoly environment, as well as providing an option that is in direct response to pains or challenges that their customers have articulated. Because voluntary program participants tend to be more engaged with the utility than non-participants, they can also become a good target audience to engage on other related programs that the utility currently offers or may offer in the future. Lastly, in terms of creating value, there are certain cases where a public utility commission may grant the utility authority to earn a rate of return on renewable energy projects developed as a result of voluntary program demand, allowing the utility to extract additional value from its voluntary program. That's not a frequent case, but it's possible, so it's definitely worth exploring. We also know that successful utilities are the ones that include startup costs for items such as new or upgraded billing system, or the first year's marketing and administrative costs in the program planning phase. These utilities have explored strategies such as limited ratepayer funding, a shareholder investment, or accepting a longer payback period as a way to manage some of these upfront costs. Also, successful utilities know what their billing system is capable of. Many billing systems are older, and utilities are in the process of working on getting them upgraded, but it's important that the utility explore how long it might take to build the infrastructure into their billing system so that they can accurately bill customers for this new product for which they've enrolled. Inaccurate billing can have very negative consequences on a program, on the customer side, both in terms of their customer loyalty, but also stakeholder perception of the effectiveness of the program. Regulatory and auditing bodies have a particular interest in the accuracy and transparency around how these programs are billed. And given how important accuracy and transparency is to the customer and to the commission, it's important to understand how billing of the product will actually show up on the customer's bills, and also how the back-end process will be accounted for in the finance organization. Lastly, for this category, successful utilities attempt to maintain flexibility in their supply offering for this product by blending, I said, local project supply options. Local can mean in state or within the region. It's helpful too to define what local means to you and your customers, but with blending this local supply with lower cost national supply, so long as the cost to customers continues to remain affordable and equitable. We know customers value local or regional supply options. However, project availability and/or product cost considerations may limit the utility's ability to offer that kind of local supply in the near term. So it's something to take into account in terms of trade-offs, knowing what is possible for the program in the early years versus what could be possible in the later years. And then finally, for gas utilities that are thinking strategically and working to incorporate their voluntary programs into their broader environmental, social, and governance, or ESG efforts, they will benefit most from these three things: engaging their customers on an ongoing basis, considering all of their supply procurement options, and certifying their programs. We know that successful utilities have been the ones to engage their customers by giving them many opportunities to learn about the programs and participate. This can include investing in direct sales and marketing channels, as well as awareness-focused marketing efforts. They also consider all of their procurement options, including procuring unbundled RNG attributes versus, say, physical RNG gas in the pipeline system, and or blending carbon credits with RNG into the supply offering. This option is starting to trend more with gas utilities that are looking to mitigate some of the higher market costs of RNG relative to carbon credits, while still maintaining a compelling yet cost-effective product for their customers. And lastly, we know that successful utilities invest in certifying their programs, for example, with Green E, to have an added layer of transparency and outside legitimacy. Doing so enables that the program adheres to best practices in green marketing and communications, which in turn helps to build industry trust in these new markets, which is incredibly important. If gas utilities adhere to all or even some of these best practices, they will be better equipped to increase the likelihood of program approval by their regulatory body, manage challenges facing supply, and increase the likelihood of overall program success. Offering a voluntary program is one potentially powerful path forward that I'm confident will lead to benefits for gas utilities, their customers, and the climate. Done right, these programs can be cost-effective, efficient, and low risk, offering a win-win for the utility and the end customer alike. For the gas utilities in the audience today, and for those who work with and support gas utilities, I'll leave you with this call to action. Demonstrate climate action while engaging customers with a voluntary program to address their emissions today. I thank you for your time, and I look forward to taking any questions you might have. I'm keeping an eye on the Q&A box here, so I'm going to navigate over to questions, and I will pause here and see if anyone has any questions for me. Let's see. So I think I got a direct question that is asking about what we've observed in terms of timelines to get a voluntary program to market. So this is a it depends question. You know, it can take as much time as it could related to the commission process. You know, the commission itself or your utilities regulatory body may have to take a look and see what else is on the docket. Is this the first time that your regulatory body or commission has seen this type of program come up before, or maybe other utilities in the state have raised a similar program and they are well aware of it? So if they, depending on timing, depending on the level of information and engagement they've had on this type of program, it could determine more or less time that would be needed to really do due diligence, educate and engage with the commission and also other stakeholders. We mentioned interveners and you know, either staunch supporters or opponents that can come in and have questions. It's important to do that legwork up front to make sure that the commission is engaged and understands what type of program it is. So I would argue that timelines, again, depend on mainly that commission process for getting the approvals, the actual activity of getting the program launched and implemented and managed on an ongoing basis. Something like that can happen within 6 months to a year, and sometimes faster if the utility itself is very engaged on the program. All right, and let's see. I had another question about what is the best approach to getting stakeholder alignment and addressing internal concerns. So I was just mentioning the importance of educating stakeholders early on. Really internally though, that's externally. What happens internally within the utility is that it's important to really work to get buy-in from the top down. So if you are in a utility and you're a practitioner and you are wondering, how can I take action, get this program going, it does set you up for success by making sure to engage and get buy-in from leadership. It can be harder for a smaller group in the organization to lead from deeper within the utility. It's also important to, poll and survey and talk with internal stakeholders to understand what are their goals. What kind of return on investment are they looking for on a program? Are they seeking to maximize customer satisfaction? Are they seeking to achieve a carbon reduction goal that's voluntary? It's important to really set value statements early with leadership so that that voluntary program can really work to balance achieving those goals aligned with those values and doing so in a way that is still achieving a product that customers want to buy and that will be successful in the long term. All right, I've got another question here. For the different markets we're in, what has been the biggest customer adoption rate and any trends we've seen for the organization that has been achieved? Well, I will say that we have worked with utilities across the country. We've worked with electric utilities and gas utilities. Definitely greatest customer adoption rates tend to be in the Pacific Northwest. I'm located in Seattle. Familiar with this here is that folks in the Pacific Northwest and even just West Coast states generally tend to be stronger adopters of renewable energy and care more about their reducing their carbon footprint. And so they have a propensity to really want to participate in these programs. They're also putting pressure on their utilities to offer these kinds of programs. I will say too that when we look at other parts of the country, large commercial customers are tending to be the ones to raise their hand and come to their gas utility in particular, saying that they have sustainability targets, that they have net zero goals, and that they are looking for solutions to address their emissions. And it could be that right now, large customers are the ones that are driving that interest and that residential customers will be, following behind. I think that it's definitely growing in terms of interest. We've seen growth and interest in the Southeast United States as well. And that's primarily been our experience, is that customers want these kinds of programs and it's only growing in terms of interest. All right, and then got another question that came into me about, I mentioned ROI. What is the best approach to demonstrating ROI to gain internal support for the program? Again, this could be another it depends question, but I think understanding first and foremost that we really do, when we work with utilities to design a program, it's important that we do take into account that the program will be paid for by participants, that the program itself will not burden the general rate base. So looking at the participants in a program, what they're paying, what revenue do we expect to receive as part of a program? So it's helpful really first to understand and do that customer research up front and gauge level of interest and participation. That's kind of work that we do with gas utilities, is to understand what the propensity is. So I mentioned, folks in the Pacific Northwest are very interested in this kind of program. Well, what about parts of the Southeast or the Midwest? We can help utilities understand what their customer base looks like, what their level of interest might be, and really start to understand what participation levels could look like in the future. Participation levels are important for thinking about ROI because enrollment levels in a subscription-based program are important to maintain over time. You'll have natural attrition from folks moving out of the service territory, but also moving in, and making sure that you are ensuring enrollments that cover that attrition so that there's a good, stable base of participation over time. The reason why I said this question, or the answer to this question depends, is that it's back to that point about engaging internal stakeholders and thinking about what are the goals for the program. Does the utility have a set type of ROI goal that you're aiming for? So for example, how is payback defined? Is it number of years? Are you looking for a point in time when there's positive NPV? Are you looking at recouping all your startup costs by a certain time? So really clearly getting a definition of what return on investment means to the utility. And it's also important to identify the timeline by which it's possible to get there, and then what those trade-offs might mean for how that program is managed. So if payback is set at 5 years versus say 10 years, and let's say payback is positive NPV, then it's going to be really important that this particular program invests more heavily or more directly in enrollment. So that could be building awareness, that could be direct sales, that could be marketing acquisition tactics, like really making sure customers know and have a direct way to enroll and participate in the program. So to recap there, I guess it's define what payback means. It involves designing that program in such a way that it can achieve those goals. And that can involve a certain set of trade-offs or different strategies in enrollment and mitigating attrition to make sure that's possible. All right, and then check in here, see if we got any more questions. I know it's tough with y'all being muted, so not necessarily being able to jump in here. Let's see, I have another question that came in. Do voluntary programs for natural gas really ascribe to the permanence criterion for carbon emissions reductions? If yes, how? The current available alternatives are quite limited in their contribution to carbon reduction. I'm not sure I totally follow. If we're talking about permanence criteria, possibly related to carbon credits. What I will say here, as we just talk generally speaking about carbon emission reduction. So there is current guidance right now, which is it's changing, and also the industry is not totally aligned on common definitions for, especially in renewable natural gas, how claims are made around reduction. Most of our programs that we're working with right now are focused on carbon credits and trying to incorporate renewable natural gas where possible. Carbon credits, as we know, are not able to make claims toward emissions reductions. The important part about that is that carbon credits balance emissions. So if metric ton of emissions is generated over here, that you're balancing it with a carbon credit or offset over here. And we do follow the carbon credits that we supply follow international standards for verification, for achieving certain permanence goals in those carbon credits for what we use in our supply set. And as I was mentioning, renewable natural gas for right now is also under experiencing changes in terms of how it can be made, how claims can be made in terms of carbon reduction. So it's one of those things where we are working on focusing, how can we address emissions? How can we give customers choice to really start to take action today while the industry is coalescing and agreeing on these definitions for emissions reductions? All right, let's see, do we have any others? I did want to mention, when we were talking about best practices, what costs might come up, and as a utility, what costs you may want to consider if you're looking to build out a voluntary program. Utility side costs can typically be someone dedicated or partially dedicated to managing the program, being a program manager, a program marketer. They may not necessarily be full-time roles, but it's important that there's a dedicated program manager, a dedicated program marketer to ensure that program's launch and implementation success. And then I also mentioned the billing system side of things, or IT side of things. That can vary widely, but just knowing that utilities at this point in time are working to upgrade their digital services, better engage with their customers. And so it's important that if those upgrades are happening, to try to time those upgrades with the program, so that if there needs to be a billing upgrade, that IT expense maybe can be aggregated as part of a larger upgrade for the utility. And then, in terms of 3 degrees support, we have a range of options for how we can engage with gas utilities to provide support in developing a voluntary program. We have a lower cost option that we've just launched called the Smart Launch Solution, and would love for you to take a look at that on our website. It's a set of toolkits to help gas utilities get started. And we also offer custom solutions that can range in cost, really from getting you started from the ground up to managing and really building enrollment and marketing acquisition over time. So lots of flexibility there, but I think it's important to, as we said with the best practice, is considering those upfront costs and then building them into the planning phase, so that when we talk about ROI and program success, that it is meeting those goals through and through. All right, and I've got another question come through. Could we speak to the higher cost of RNG versus carbon credits, and how to implement higher percentages of RNG while making it financially viable for utilities and customers? Yes, so right now, and this has, I think, been the case for the last few years, is that renewable natural gas pricing in the market has been fairly volatile. It's been a bit higher in price, and that's primarily because there are credit markets where RNG can be more lucrative, say, relative to the voluntary utility market. What I mean by that is that, for example, in California and Oregon, and soon to be in a few other states, are low carbon fuel standard programs. And RNG attributes a fairly high value for, quote, a negative carbon intensity value in those markets. And so producers of RNG will prioritize selling RNG into those markets where they can achieve a higher value for their product. And so that results in maybe less available supply for other activities like a voluntary program. The thing is, though, with more demand means that there's more likelihood for increasing in supply. And these voluntary programs that utilities offer tend to be a great market signal for a strong economic base for demand for a particular product. So getting these programs started now further emphasizes, showing that demand for the RNG market to really respond with more supply in the future. And then carbon credits have also had, they've had a lot more stability in the past, but have increased in price over time as well, because more and more large commercial customers in particular are interested in carbon neutral and net zero reduction goals. Carbon credits have a role to play in addressing residual emissions that companies are not able to address through direct reductions. And so there's been more interest in carbon credits over time. And surprisingly as well, through the cryptocurrency markets, we've seen a number of crypto providers looking at carbon credits to offset their energy usage. And so it's just put a lot more demand into the carbon credit market, and supply, similar to RNG, it takes a little while. It takes a little while for those projects to be established, to be verified, to go through the rigors of these processes to make sure that they are legitimate for sale. And so now when we look at the market and say, if this is what we're seeing in terms of market pricing, prices have been going up, and or it's just been fairly volatile.
looking at implementing higher percentages of RNG in a voluntary program over time, I think can be financially viable over time, especially depending on the unique circumstances of a program. It could be that for now, for these early years, setting up a program with a blend, say, of 99% carbon credits and 1% RNG makes more sense. You could offer a different product that has a higher percentage RNG, but it will come with higher costs. The thing is, it's important to know what the customer base is interested in. It could be that there is a limited customer base that is interested and willing to pay for higher amounts of RNG in a different product. And I think that's important to know your customers, know what they're interested in, know what they're willing to pay, and providing a product to them that offers them choice if they desire to do so, while also making sure that that product overall is still affordable and equitable to all customers in the customer base. So I think there's the case for now. I think that voluntary programs can also have a feedback loop system here where that demand can inspire more supply, which should hopefully bring the cost of these products down over time. All right, and I am not seeing much more in the way of questions. I'll do the awkward silence pause here for just a second to see if anyone has anything else. All right, well, not seeing much more in the way of questions, I will move on to just say thank you very much to everyone that's attended today. We covered a lot. I probably talked too fast. You may still have questions that you're still thinking about or that we didn't get to. So I wanted to share my contact information on the slide here, and please follow up with any questions you may have. And you all will be receiving an email after with a recording of today's webinar. So I thank you again, and I hope you have a great rest of your week.